Walk into a Canadian senior's kitchen in 1973, and you would smell three things at once: Bovril simmering on the back element, toast cooling under a tea towel beside the kettle, the faint sweetness of canned peaches on a saucer near the radio. The drawer to the left of the sink held a sleeve of soda crackers, a roll of wax paper, and a pair of scissors that still worked just fine. Number 17 on your list lived in that drawer. Number 9 cost less than a dime in 1968. Number 24 came out of a tin you could picture in your sleep. These 25 snacks were never party food. They were one plate at one table with the radio on low. Hit that subscribe button. Here are the 25 forgotten Canadian snacks for seniors living alone. Number 25, Bovril toast. The brown jar with the yellow label sat on a shelf in nearly every Canadian pantry from the 1950s through the late 1980s. A widow in Hamilton would spread it thin on her toast with margarine, then sit by the window and watch the bus go past. The smell was beefy and salty and a little medicinal. For one person at a kitchen table, Bovril was warmth in a teaspoon. It cost almost nothing per slice. The jar lasted half a year. A retired streetcar driver in Toronto kept his on the same wooden shelf his wife had wiped down every Saturday for 40 years. He still wiped it on Saturdays after she was gone. The toast was the easy part. The shelf was the hard part. If your kitchen ever held a jar of Bovril, you remember the color of the label before you remember the taste. It asked nothing of a tired body. It gave back something steady. The slice was always cut on the diagonal. Soft, floury, and warm from the oven. The tea biscuit was the cheapest baked thing a Canadian grandmother could pull together on a Tuesday morning. Flour, baking powder, a pinch of salt, a spoon of shortening, and a splash of milk. A retired postmistress in Antigonish made 6 at a time, ate 2 with margarine, and froze the rest in a cottage cheese tub for the rest of the week. The tops were always a little uneven. The bottoms were always a little brown. She did not own a stand mixer. She did not need one. For one person eating alone, your hot tea biscuit split open with a knob of butter was Sunday morning on a regular Wednesday. The kitchen smelled like flour for an hour afterwards. That was the whole point. Many seniors still mix the dough with their fingers, the way they were taught at 12. Your hands remember the recipe even when your memory does not. Number 23, saltines crumbled into carnation evaporated milk. This one is older than most viewers remember. A widow on a fixed pension in St. John would pour cold evaporated milk straight from the tin into a soup bowl, then crush a sleeve of saltines into it until the milk turned thick and sweet, a spoon of white sugar on top. That was supper some nights. The milk was rich, almost like cream, and it cost a fraction of fresh milk in the early 1970s. The saltines turned to soft, salty pillows you could eat with a teaspoon. Living on a single pension, this was a meal that needed no stovetop element, no timer, no oven. Just a bowl, a tin, and a sleeve. The bowl went straight into the sink, and the tin went back into the fridge with the lid pressed down by a teaspoon. Quiet food, eaten quietly. If your grandparents kept a tin of carnation in the fridge with a folded triangle of foil over the top, you already know how this snack tastes. Number 22, black diamond cheese on a Triscuit. The orange waxed brick of black diamond cheddar lived in nearly every Canadian fridge from the 1960s onward. A retired school teacher in Kingston cut it in thin slabs with the same paring knife she had used since her wedding in 1958. She laid each slab on a Triscuit, added a thin coin of pickle from a Bix jar, and ate 4 of them while the kettle boiled. The Triscuit was salty, woven, and slightly sweet. The cheddar was sharp enough to wake you up after a nap. Many seniors kept Black Diamond on the same shelf in the fridge year after year because moving it felt like moving the furniture. The cheese was your supper some nights. The Triscuit box on the counter was the only sound in the room. Anyone who lived in a Canadian house in the 1970s can hear the slick of cheddar coming off the wax paper before reading the next line. The kitchen knew the rhythm. Number 21st, the sugar sandwich. 2 slices of white Wonder Bread, a smear of margarine, a heavy spoon of white sugar in the middle, pressed flat with the heel of the hand. That was the entire build. A grandmother in Sault Ste. Marie made one for herself most afternoons in the early 1970s, cut diagonally, wrapped in a square of wax paper for later. The sugar made a faint crunch between the bread. The margarine kept the sugar from falling out the sides. It was childhood food made for an adult who had outlived most of her friends. The kitchen clock ticked. The sandwich took 2 minutes. It tasted like nothing else and everything at once. Some seniors still keep a tin of sugar by the bread box for exactly this reason. The recipe never wrote itself down. It did not need to. If you ever had your grandmother slip you a sugar sandwich on a Saturday afternoon, you carry the memory in your tongue, not your head. The yellow tin with the bird logo had been on Canadian shelves since the days of the British Empire, and it never really left. A retiree in Halifax would whisk a heaping spoon of birds into hot milk on the back element, then tear up a heel of stale bread into a chipped Pyrex bowl, and pour the warm yellow custard over the top. The bread softened. The custard cooled. There might be a dusting of nutmeg if there was any in the spice rack. For one person at a small table, this was dessert and supper at the same time. Custard tasted like the kitchen of an aunt who had passed, the way a song on the radio can pull a whole decade back into a single moment. Many Canadian seniors still buy the same yellow tin. The recipe is on the back. Nobody reads it. If your aunt ever served you custard with a sprinkle of nutmeg from a small red tin, you know exactly which yellow tin she meant. Number 19, Click on toast. The blue and red tin of Click canned pork sat next to Calm and Maple Leaf canned ham on every general store shelf in rural Canada from the 1950s onwards. A retired fisherman in Gaspé would slice a 1/4-inch slab off the cold loaf, lay it on a hot pan with a knob of margarine, and brown both sides until the edges crisped up. He served it on toast with a swipe of yellow mustard from a tube. The smell was salty and slightly sweet, like a bologna stand at a small town fair in 1967. The tin had a key that rolled the lid back. It was the sort of supper your one good hand could put together. Click on toast was the workhorse snack of pensioners across the Maritimes for decades. The tin lasted 4 meals. That was the whole point. If you opened a tin of Click with a roll key and the key broke off halfway, you also remember how the kitchen drawer collected those broken keys for years. Number 18, maple syrup on white bread. This was Quebec country food, plain and proud. A retired lumberyard clerk in Trois-Rivières would lay a slice of fresh white bread on a saucer, drown it in dark maple syrup from a camp tin or a St. Pierre jug, and eat it slowly with a fork. The bread soaked the syrup like a sponge. The edges turned amber and almost caramelized where the syrup pooled. It was breakfast in the bush camps, a snack at home, and a small treat after the rosary. For one person on a single pension, a slice of bread and a swig of syrup was an old comfort that did not need company. The bottle lasted weeks. The memory lasted a lifetime. Many Francophone seniors still pour a little syrup straight onto toast and call it dessert. If your grandfather poured it directly into a saucer and dipped his bread, you saw the original recipe before the city forgot it. The syrup tin had a small dent on one side. Number 17, the Vachon Jos Louis. 2 soft chocolate cakes with a swipe of vanilla cream in the middle, sealed in a thin chocolate coating and wrapped in red and white plastic. A retired textile worker in Sherbrooke used to keep a box of Jos Louis on top of the fridge for the great-grandchildren who almost never came. She ate one every Saturday with a cup of Maxwell House. The wrapper crinkled the way it had crinkled in her own kitchen in 1971. Vachon was a Sainte-Marie-de-Beauce family before it was a brand, and for a generation of Québécois seniors, a Jos Louis was a tiny ritual sealed in plastic. The cake was a little dry by the third Saturday of the box. That was fine. It was the wrapper that mattered. It sounded like a kitchen full of grandchildren even when your kitchen was quiet. If you grew up with a box of Vachon on top of the fridge, you can still hear that crinkle. The freezer hum sat under it. Saturday after Saturday. The same. Number 16. Habitant pea soup straight from the can. The squat green and yellow tin from Quebec was a fixture in Canadian pantries for over 50 years. A retired bus driver in Sudbury would crank it open, dump it into a small saucepan, splash in a finger of milk, and stir until it bubbled around the edges. The smell was smoky and bean-sweet, like a cabin in the woods after a storm. He ate it with 2 soda biscuits and a slice of black diamond on the side. The whole supper took 6 minutes. Habitant came in 2 flavors, with ham and without, and most pensioners kept 3 tins on the shelf at any given moment because the price was reliable and the soup was filling. For a person eating alone, your tin of Habitant was a winter coat in a bowl. The pot rinsed clean with hot water. If you ever cracked open a Habitant tin on a January night while the wind shook the storm window, you remember the smell better than any photograph. Number 15. Banana on toast with brown sugar. A widow in Brandon used to make this when the bananas got a little too speckled to eat plain. 2 slices of toast, a thin layer of margarine, a sliced ripe banana laid in coins across the top, a heavy dusting of brown sugar, and 20 seconds under the broiler until the sugar bubbled. The kitchen filled with the smell of caramel and banana bread without the work of banana bread. She sat at the small table by the window and ate it with a fork. The crust went into a saucer for the chickadees on the back step. Living on a single pension, this snack used up bread that was getting stale, bananas that were getting soft, and brown sugar that was hardening in the bag. 3 dying things became 1 warm supper. Your plate emptied in 5 minutes. If you ever watched your grandmother turn 3 almost spoiled ingredients into a hot snack on a saucer, you know how thrift can taste like a treat. Number 14. The saltine and tea dunker. A retired switchboard operator in London, Ontario, kept a tin of soda crackers next to her kettle for 42 years. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, she dropped a saltine into a cup of strong red rose tea, waited until it half collapsed, and ate it from the spoon with a thin coat of butter on top. The cracker tasted of hot tea, and salt, and butter, and the faint metallic edge of an old teaspoon. For one person at a kitchen table, this was a ritual that asked nothing and gave back something steady. Your clock above the stove kept time better than your watch. What most people miss about this kind of snack is that the food was never the point. The dunking was the point. The kettle was the point. The chair by the window was the point. Eating alone shapes the body in small, accumulated ways. The same chair, the same cup, the same cracker, the same view of the lilac bush in the backyard. Researchers who study aging in place talk about ritualized small meals as one of the strongest predictors of cognitive steadiness in seniors who live by themselves. The cracker is not the medicine. The order of things is the medicine. A pensioner who can still set out a cup, drop a cracker, and sit for 15 minutes is doing something a clinical study can measure. Your empty cup goes in the sink. The tin goes back beside the kettle. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, the same kitchen, the same chair, the same cracker. Number 13, the half-portion craft dinner. The blue box was already a Canadian institution by 1965, and by 1985, it was a senior's go-to. A retired postmaster in Owen Sound would split a box in half with a butter knife, pour exactly half the noodles into a small saucepan, save the rest in a mason jar with a lid, and stretch one box across 2 suppers. He used a finger of margarine and a dribble of milk because the budget did not allow for both at full measure. The orange powder turned the noodles a color that does not exist in nature. He ate the bowl in front of Front Page Challenge with a glass of Allen's apple juice. Many Canadian pensioners learned to have a craft dinner the way their parents had learned to have a loaf of bread. The savings added up across a year. Your taste buds did not notice the difference. If your father ever stretched a single blue box across Tuesday and Wednesday, you carry that lesson without remembering you learned it. Number 12. Dare maple cookies with whole milk. The white and red Dare bag with cream-filled maple leaf cookies has been on Canadian shelves since the 1960s. It never tried to be anything fancy. A retired hairdresser in Moncton kept a bag in the cupboard above the toaster, and she pulled out 2 cookies every night at 9 o'clock and dunked them into a glass of cold homo milk. The cream filling melted slowly into the milk. The maple leaf shape softened. The bag lasted nearly a month if she was careful. For a person eating alone, your small ritual of 2 cookies and a glass of cold milk was a way to mark the end of the day. The CBC late news played on the radio. The cookies cost very little per pull. The bag stayed clipped with a wooden clothespin between visits to the cupboard. If your grandmother kept a Dare bag pinned shut with the same clothespin for 20 years, you saw frugality in motion without anyone naming it. Number 11. Cottage roll. Cold from the fridge. A pickled pork shoulder simmered in a big pot on Sunday with a few peppercorns and a bay leaf, then sliced cold for the rest of the week. A retired logger in Bathurst kept his cottage roll wrapped in butcher paper on the bottom shelf of the Frigidaire. He carved off 2 pink, salty slices and laid them on a soda biscuit with a smear of yellow mustard. The slices were thin enough to read a newspaper through. Cottage roll was Maritime food, and it stretched a single Sunday cook into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday lunches with no extra work. For one person at a small kitchen table, that kind of forward planning was the whole secret of keeping yourself fed on a fixed pension. The biscuit went down dry. The next bite was salty. The cycle worked. If your kitchen ever held a butcher paper bundle on the bottom shelf, that bundle was probably cottage roll. The string was tied in a slip knot. Number 10. Beans on toast. Heinz beans in tomato sauce. The small pull-tab tin, dumped into a saucepan and warmed until they steamed. Poured over a single slice of buttered toast. A retired nurse in Charlottetown ate this twice a week from the late 1970s onwards. The beans softened the toast at the edges. The middle stayed crisp under the spoon. She added a shake of black pepper and sometimes a dollop of HP brown sauce if the bottle was still in the fridge. Beans on toast came over from Britain with the war brides and stayed because it was cheap, fast, and warm. On a single pension, those 3 things were the whole shopping list. The tin lid bent back into a saucer for the cat. Your plate cleared in 8 minutes. Many Maritime grandmothers still eat this exactly the same way today. In a house where the HP bottle had a sticky brown ring around the neck, beans on toast came around more times than anyone could count. Number 9. A single piece of Sweet Marie bar. The Lonely Sweet Marie with its maroon wrapper and bright green lettering has been a Canadian corner store fixture since well before most viewers were born. A retired clerk in Sault Ste. Marie used to keep a bar in the kitchen drawer and break off 1 inch on a Saturday afternoon, no more, no less. The peanut, caramel, and chocolate hit at the same time, like a memory of a hockey game on the kitchen radio in 1972. The wrapper got folded back over, and the rest of the bar stayed for the next Saturday. The drawer closed on it gently. The wrapper stayed crinkled in the same fold for weeks. For one person on a fixed income, your Sweet Marie was a small, dignified treat. If you ever broke off exactly 1 inch and put the rest back, you understood pacing better than any household budget book could teach. The drawer slid shut. The kitchen waited a week. Number 8. Allen's apple juice with toast. The blue and white can of Allen's apple juice was a staple in church basements and senior apartments across Ontario from the late 1960s onwards. A retired widow in Peterborough poured a juice glass full from a chilled can, ate 2 slices of toast with margarine, and called it her supper most Tuesday nights. The juice was sweet and slightly cloudy. The toast was the color of a maple leaf in October. Your can went back in the fridge under a saucer to keep the cat off it. One thing I noticed in the records of small Canadian grocers from this era is how much shelf space went to single-serving juices and tinned snack starches in the 1970s and 1980s. The rise of Loblaws and Sobeys and Provigo as national chains, and the slow squeeze of Vashon and Hostess in the discount aisle reshaped what a pensioner could afford to keep in your cupboard. House brands like No Name Yellow Label, launched by Loblaws in 1978, were aimed at the senior on a fixed income who counted dimes at the till. The discount snack aisle was not an accident. It was a quiet response to a generation of widows and retired tradesmen who needed to feed themselves on the difference between a pension check and the rent. Your single can of juice and 2 slices of toast was not poverty in the dramatic sense. It was a careful, considered budget worked out at a kitchen table by a person who knew exactly what every shelf cost. For a person eating alone, Allen's apple juice with toast was a small daily routine that fit the shape of your house. The same glass, the same toast, the same chair. Number 7. Fried bologna, a single slice. A retired carpenter in Sydney kept a tube of maple leaf bologna in the meat drawer for years. He laid 1 slice in a hot cast iron pan, pressed it flat with the bottom of a coffee mug, and cooked it until the edges curled up like a small bowl. He filled the bowl with mustard. He ate it with a soda biscuit on the side. The smell was salty and a little sweet, like a small town diner at 7 in the morning in 1968. 1 slice was enough. The tube went back in the drawer with a twist tie around the open end. For one person at a kitchen table, your fried bologna was protein, fat, and a small bit of theater on a Tuesday night. The pan rinsed clean. The mustard tube clicked shut. The radio kept playing. If you ever pressed a slice of bologna flat with a coffee mug, you learned a small Canadian trick that nobody bothered to write into a cookbook. Number 6. Nestle Quick with whole milk. The yellow tin with the Quick Bunny on the label sat in nearly every Canadian kitchen from the 1960s onwards. A widow in London, Ontario stirred 2 heaping spoons into a tall glass of cold homo milk, watched the chocolate powder swirl down the side, and sipped it slow at the kitchen table while the kettle warmed for tea. The Quick tasted like grade 3 lunch period in 1971. The little metal scoop lived inside the tin. The lid never closed all the way. For a person eating alone, your glass of Quick before bed was a small permission slip, the kind a tired body grants itself after a long day of being careful. The empty glass left a brown ring at the bottom. The cat licked it. Nobody told. If your grandparents kept the same Quick tin on the same shelf for 15 years and you never once saw them switch brands, you saw loyalty without anyone naming it. The scoop rattled as the tin emptied. Number 5. Raisin bread with margarine. The Dempster's or Weston's raisin bread loaf, plump with raisins and slightly sweet, has been a Canadian breakfast and snack food since at least the 1950s. A retired teacher in Saskatoon would pull 2 slices, run them under the broiler for 30 seconds, lay on a thin layer of margarine, and eat them at the small table beside the bird feeder. The raisins puffed under the heat, the margarine pooled into the soft holes. It was almost a dessert, and almost a breakfast, and almost a tea. For one person at a kitchen table, your raisin bread was a thrifty stretch on the regular loaf. The bag clipped shut, the toaster cooled, the kettle hissed in the background as the chickadees came and went. If you ever pulled the last 2 slices out of a Dempster's bag and saved the heel for the birds, you know the shape of this Tuesday afternoon better than any photograph could show. The kitchen warmed up around you. Number 4. Tinned sardine on a soda biscuit. The flat tin of King Oscar or Brunswick sardines packed in oil with a key on the back has been a fixture of Canadian general stores since the days of the Empire. A retired ferry hand in Lunenburg would key open a tin, lay 1 whole sardine on a soda biscuit, drop a single drop of vinegar on top, and eat 4 of them in the time it took the kettle to whistle. The oil ran down his thumb. The biscuit absorbed it. The smell was briny and a little smoky, like the wharf in October. The tin went into the bin upside down so the cat would not get curious. For a person eating alone, your sardine biscuit was protein, fat, salt, and tradition in one small package. The plate was a saucer. The saucer went in the sink. Your kitchen smelled like the harbor for an hour. If you ever ate sardines on a soda biscuit at a kitchen table by yourself, you ate a meal that predates Confederation in spirit. Number 3. Canned peaches on a saucer. The Aylmer or Del Monte tin of cling peaches in heavy syrup was the dessert backbone of Canadian kitchens from the 1950s through the 1980s. A widow in Welland would crank open a tin on a Sunday afternoon, pour 2 peach halves into a small green Pyrex saucer, spoon a little syrup over the top, and eat them with a thin carnation milk drizzle. The peaches were almost too sweet. The syrup was sticky, and the milk made the syrup go pale. She kept the rest of the tin in the fridge under a small plate weighted with a teaspoon. For one person on a fixed income, those 2 peach halves were a treat that lasted a week. The Pyrex saucer was older than most of the people on her street. It still held 2 peach halves perfectly. If your grandmother ever set a green Pyrex saucer in front of you with 2 peach halves and a thin milk drizzle, you remember the shape of the saucer before you remember the taste. Number 2. Saltine crackers with butter and brown sugar. A retired farmhand in Wetaskiwin used to lay 6 saltines on a saucer, smear each one with a thumb of butter, and crown each with a heap of brown sugar pressed in by the back of a spoon. The salt and the sugar argued on the tongue. The butter held the brown sugar in place like wet sand. He ate them slowly with a cup of red rose tea. The kitchen smelled faintly of caramel, where the butter met the warm cracker. Many Canadian pensioners still keep a tin of saltines and a brown sugar bag for exactly this snack. It cost almost nothing per saucer. It tasted like a treat that had been waiting on the shelf the whole time. Here's the thing nobody talks about when they talk about cooking for one in a small kitchen. The dignity is not in the food. The dignity is in the small, deliberate act of setting out a saucer for yourself. A widow who lays 6 saltines on a plate, butters each one, and eats them at the table is not just surviving. She is keeping faith with a kitchen she has known for 40 years. Aging in place observations done across Manitoba, Ontario, and Nova Scotia have all noted the same pattern. Seniors who plate small snacks for themselves, instead of eating standing at the counter, hold on to autonomy longer. Your plate is a vote for the table. Your table is a vote for the day. Living on a single pension, that small vote is worth more than the price of the brown sugar. The saucer is your kitchen telling you that today is a real day with a real meal in it. 6 saltines, a thumb of butter, a heap of sugar, a hot cup of tea. The kitchen agrees. Your hands know the shape of this small dignity, even when the rest of the world has forgotten how to recognize it. Number 1. A hot mug of Bovril. We started with Bovril toast. We end with the cup itself. A retired night watchman in Sault Ste. Marie used to fill a heavy white mug with hot water from the kettle, stir in a heaping teaspoon of Bovril from the brown jar, and drink it slow at the kitchen table while the heat came up in the radiator. The smell was beefy and salty, and warm in a way that filled the room without filling the stomach. For one person at a kitchen table on a January night, your mug of hot Bovril was the cheapest hug a kitchen could give. The mug warmed both hands. The radio played the late hockey scores. The kettle clicked off. Many Canadian seniors still keep the same brown jar on the same shelf and pour the same mug at the same hour. Your mug goes in the sink. The jar lid clicks. The kitchen quiets down for the night. If your last memory of your grandmother is her hands wrapped around a mug of Bovril, you carry the smell more clearly than any photograph could hold. Make one of these this week. Pour a mug of Bovril, butter a saltine, and drop a dare cookie into a glass of cold milk. Set out a saucer for yourself. Sit down with it. Tell us in the comments which snack pulled the strongest memory back and where in this country your kitchen sits. The smell of Bovril, the toast under the tea towel, the canned peaches on the saucer beside the radio. These are not just snacks. They are proof that one plate at one table, eaten alone in a quiet Canadian kitchen, can still be a small daily act of dignity. Your kettle clicks. The light fades at the window. The kitchen rests.